Hi guys, this is Nick Wheeler. I'm putting this video together to explain what the knife vise is that I build, and what the reason for having one is. As a custom knife maker, we all have a time that we need to work on a handle. I mean, whether it's filing, hand sanding, there's always a time where handwork is involved, at least for most of us. If you have a typical bench vise like this, if you protect the blade, you're limited to working in this plane like this on the handle. If you have a swivel base to the vise, which this one does, then, you know, once it's tightened down and you move the base, that increases the positioning that options you have, but it's still fairly limited, really. So that's where this comes in. This is what I am personally talking about, like on blade forums. When I talk about a knife vise, what it is to me, the one that I use, it's very simple. It's a piece of pipe welded to a piece of square tubing. It's got this particular one has a 5/8 nut welded to the tubing with a corresponding bolt running through that, which tightens down essentially some filler material that is inside the tubing. Now the reason for this gizmo is allowing us pretty much infinite positioning while working on a knife. So protect the blade. I use a little piece of paper towel and super cheap electrical tape. I buy it 10 rolls at a time at Harbor Freight for like $4. Now you just tighten it down. The ones I use have a bolt on them. We've been talking about using an adjustable ratcheting locking lever, which would be nice, but anyway, so tighten it down, get it secure, and now instead of being limited on how we can position this thing to work on the handle, we have an infinite number of positions we can put this thing in. Because of it having this pipe on it, you can rotate this in any position you want. If you have a swivel base on the vise, then you have even more options. Just to give a very specific example of where I wouldn't know what to do without mine, I do a lot of these swept in sculpted guards. Now when I'm shaping these, I'll position first side like this. I do my filing. The nice thing for me about this is it gives a good solid foundation to rest your leading forearm on while you're doing the shaping. Now for me, normally I would prefer that would be this one, since I'm left-handed. Everybody else is probably not agreeing with me. But I do that side, just turn it around, get it in a position, and it makes it so much easier to shape things symmetrically when you can locate this thing where your body movements are smooth and comfortable, and you're not reaching around something. You're not, you know, it's not a bunch of herky-jerky movement because you're uncomfortable while you're doing it. Another example, finishing the inside of the guard lug, which is this surface, FYI. You put it in here, and I do it pretty much completely vertical most of the time, and I can work on the surface. Now, the fact that there's this length of the pipe means I have a fair amount of height adjustment on where I position that. Now, this has all been under the premise that you're working with a standard bench vise. Try not to confuse anybody with this part, but I use this vise, which is called a multi position rotating head vise, because this surface rotates, or this head rotates, and it has pipe jaws on the bottom of it, which is really nice for this knife vise because it's really easy to change positions and then lock it down really securely with very little movement, very little effort. But you don't have to have a rotating head vise. It just works really nicely with these. Like I said, a standard bench vise that is fixed in this position will work really well. Now if you do want one of these, I bought this one at Harbor Freight when I was 18 years old. It was $35 back then. I think they're about twice that now. It's definitely not on the same quality level as, you know, like Wilton, Columbia, Rigid. But for a knife maker, it's a very, very valuable tool. I use it on every single knife that I make. I have all those other brands. I have some really nice Wiltons. I use them. I love them. They're great. But I use them for some things. I use this knife on every knife, or this vise on every single knife that I work on in my shop. So this is what the knife vise is that I'm talking about. It's the one that I use. In case you're wondering why this looks a little funky, I have a hard piece of rubber and a piece of abrasive belt cleaner stick, like most of us use on our belt grinder. Hacked a piece of that off. I super glued those to the side of the knife vise, and so when I'm shaping a handle, I can tap a file against the hard rubber piece here and knock out quite a bit of the swarf. I don't have to use a file card as much that way. And then the abrasive cleaner with the coarser sandpaper, like 120 to 320, you can actually get rid of some of the gunk in the paper with the abrasive cleaner. The finer grits, it's not worth wasting your time, in my opinion. But anyway, it looks weird, but that's why those are on there. It's very handy. I don't do a lot of shoe shining type sanding, but the very little bit that I do, you rub the emery cloth on there, it gets clogged up. You can run it against this and it cleans it out really easy. So that's why that's like that. Again, this is very simple, but it's a super functional tool, and I use this one or a couple different sizes of this on every knife that I make. And one quick side note, I've had a lot of guys, couple guys, contact me and tell me, oh, you need to get soft vise jaw caps. I think those guys are simply not understanding what I am personally talking about when I'm talking about a knife vise. These are soft vise jaw caps. They don't work with these because I made aluminum jaws for this vise, but they have magnets embedded in them, so if you had steel jaws, they'd sit there. They're supposed to be a more cushy surface to clamp down on with the vise. Personally, I don't care for these. In fact, I had to hunt these down because I couldn't remember where they were. But I just wanted to point out that to those guys, I do know what these are, but these have nothing to do with this knife vise, nor are they needed with this, and they absolutely are not a replacement or alternative to this, because all these are is a soft, cushy surface. These are not going to give you the infinite positioning to work on a knife handle that this simple tool does. So hopefully that clears everything up. Thanks for watching.